The Grand Galactic Council chamber stretched 3 kilometers across, a massive dome of crystalline material that floated above the planet's centrum. Inside, representatives from 47 different species sat in their assigned seats. The chamber hummed with the sound of 1,000 translators working at once. Ambassador stood in the human section, a small area near the back of the chamber. He wore a simple gray suit, his face calm and unreadable. Next to him, Captain adjusted her military uniform and whispered, "They're not even listening." She was right. The delegation, tall, blue-skinned creatures who controlled most of the galaxy's trade routes, were talking among themselves. The representatives, insect-like beings who ran the council's administrative systems, clicked their mandibles in what knew was laughter. The powerful warriors with 4 arms and thick armor plating didn't even look in the human direction. Doctor, the third member of the human delegation, checked her data pad. "Vote count is predictable," she said quietly. 44 against us, 2 abstaining, 1 in favor. "As always," replied. The current debate was about voting representation. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for 200 years. In that time, humans had built most of the infrastructure that kept the galaxy running. They maintained the supply chains that moved food and materials between stars. They served in peacekeeping forces across 100 systems. They designed the computer systems that managed everything from traffic control to waste disposal. But humans held only 3% of the voting power in the council. The High Merchant, a creature named, stood to speak. His translator made his voice sound smooth and condescending. "The human request for equal representation is, once again, humans are valued members of our council, but they lack the refinement necessary for full voting privileges." Laughter rippled through the chamber. Continued, "However, we do have an important matter for our human colleagues. The border dispute between the Union and the Federation has escalated. We require human peacekeeping forces to deploy within the month." Felt tense beside him. This was the 3rd time in 5 years that the Council had demanded human soldiers for alien wars. Additionally, and Coordinator added, human technical staff must increase output on the new relay stations. Our expansion into the Outer Rim requires faster completion. Doctor's jaw tightened. Human engineers had been working double shifts for months already. The vote was called. 44 voices approved the deployment, 2 abstained. Only Earth's single vote opposed. Stood slowly. The chamber quieted, but only because protocol required it. Most of the aliens looked bored. "I have a statement," said. "Make it brief," replied, waving a dismissive hand. Walked to the center of the speaking floor. His footsteps echoed in the massive chamber. Behind him and exchanged glances. They knew what was coming. "For 200 years," began, his voice steady, "humanity has served this council. We have maintained your ships. We have built your stations. We have fought your wars. We have solved your problems." "Yes, yes," interrupted, "and you've been compensated fairly. What is your point?" "My point," said, "is that this relationship is ending. Effective immediately, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council." The chamber fell silent. It lasted only a moment before laughter erupted. "Withdraw?" His voice dripped with amusement. "You cannot withdraw. Where would you go? What would you do?" Continued as if he hadn't heard. "All treaties are void. All agreements are canceled. All human personnel will return to human space within 30 days. "Ridiculous," and Coordinator shouted. "You need us more than we need you." "You are making a terrible mistake," a general rumbled, his 4 arms crossed. "One you will regret." Doctor stood and began reading from her data pad. "As of this moment, all human maintenance crews are recalled. All human logistics coordinators are reassigned. All human peacekeeping forces are returning to Earth territory. All technical support contracts are terminated." The laughter died down slightly. A few aliens looked uncertain. Captain stepped forward. Human ships will begin departing Council space within the hour. Any attempt to stop us will be considered an act of war." "This is absurd," his voice rose. "You will come crawling back within a week when you realize what you've lost." Looked around the chamber one last time. "You have 30 days," he repeated. "We suggest you use that time wisely." He turned and walked toward the exit, and followed. Behind them, the chamber erupted in angry voices, but also laughter. The aliens truly believed humans would return, apologetic and desperate. In the corridor outside, let out a long breath. That felt good. "It's done," said, looking at her data pad. "I've just sent the signal. Every human in Council space is getting the recall order now." Activated his communicator. "All fleet commanders begin Phase 1. We're going home." Across the galaxy, on thousands of stations and ships and planets, humans received the message. They saved their work, packed their belongings, and prepared to leave. On Station 9, the primary trade hub of the Empire, human cargo managers shut down their systems. The complex algorithms that routed ships and managed inventory, all human-designed, went dark. On Prime, human technicians stepped away from the massive computer cores they had maintained for decades. The systems that processed data for billions of citizens hummed along, for now. On Forward Base 17, human engineers closed down the fusion reactors they had been operating. The backup systems would hold, for a while. 3 days later, the first supply shipment failed to arrive at Station 12. The station master, a junior merchant named or sent an angry message to the human logistics office. No one answered. The office was empty. By day 5, 17 supply routes had broken down. They tried to operate the cargo systems themselves, but the interfaces were too complex. The routing algorithms were beyond their understanding. "Where are the humans?" or demanded, "Get them back here." But the humans were gone. Their ships had crossed into Earth territory, their stations were abandoned, their quarters were empty. On Prime, the first computer system crashed on day 6, then another, then 12 more. The administrators frantically tried to restart them, but they didn't understand the maintenance protocols. The humans had made it look so easy. On bases across the frontier, power systems began fluctuating. Life support showed warning signs. Communications relays started failing. The engineers, trained for warfare and combat systems, stared helplessly at the civilian infrastructure they had always ignored. In the Grand Galactic Council chamber, the laughter had stopped. Emergency sessions were called. Urgent messages were sent to human space. None received replies. Stood before the council, his blue skin pale with stress. "This is a temporary problem. We simply need to hire new workers, offer better contracts." But there were no workers. Other species had spent centuries specializing. The new trade, the new administration, the new war. Only humans knew how to do everything, how to adapt, how to improvise, how to solve problems that didn't fit into neat categories. The 30-day countdown had begun. The galaxy was already starting to break. Commander watched the last transport ship dock with the evacuation fleet. Another 2,000 humans, rescued from the outer colonies. They looked tired but relieved. "That's the last group from Sector 9, his second officer reported. "All human personnel accounted for." Nodded. 3 days since the walkout and the evacuation was going smoothly. Too smoothly, perhaps. The council hadn't tried to stop them. They still thought this was a bluff. In the command center of the human carrier ship Resilience, sat surrounded by holographic displays. She had been humanity's chief logistics coordinator for the entire Galactic Council. She knew exactly what was about to happen. "Show me the status board," she told the AI. The display lit up with thousands of data points. Each one represented a critical system somewhere in Council space: ship maintenance schedules, supply route calculations, power grid balancing protocols, waste management systems, communication relay operations. All of them were turning red. "Fascinating," muttered. "They really don't understand what we did for them." A young officer named approached her station. "Ma'am, we're receiving distress calls from Station 12. They say their cargo systems are malfunctioning." "Not malfunctioning," corrected. "Operating exactly as designed. The problem is they don't know how to operate them." The Empire had built their wealth on trade. They moved goods across the galaxy, buying low and selling high. But they had never bothered to learn the actual mechanics of logistics. Humans had done that for them, managing inventory, routing ships, balancing loads, predicting demand. The thought it was simple work, point and click, press a button, ship arrives. They were wrong. On day 7, the first real crisis hit. The collective's administrative systems began crashing, not all at once, that would have been too obvious. Instead, little failures cascaded into bigger ones. A traffic control system glitched, causing a minor collision. The insurance processing system failed to handle the claim. The error propagated through connected databases. Suddenly, traffic systems across an entire planet were offline. The coordinator, Val, stared at the error messages in disbelief. "Just restart it," he ordered his technicians. "We tried," they replied. "The restart sequence requires human authorization codes." "Override them." We don't know how." The truth was devastating. The collective prided themselves on their bureaucratic efficiency. They had organized their entire civilization into perfectly logical systems, but those systems had been designed and maintained by humans. They had operated them, but they had never truly understood them. Humans had built in redundancies, fail-safes, and backup protocols, not because they asked for them, but because humans thought ahead. They anticipated problems. They planned for disasters. They only followed procedures. On day 10, the Union faced their own crisis. Military bases across the frontier began experiencing power failures. Not catastrophic, not yet, but warning signs were everywhere. General, a massive warrior with decades of combat experience, stood in the engineering bay of Forward Base 17. Around him, engineers examined the fusion reactor controls with growing panic. "What is the problem?" demanded. "The reactor is operating at 87% efficiency," an engineer reported. "It should be at 99%. So fix it." "We don't know how. The humans always handled the fine adjustments." Growled, "How difficult can it be? It's a reactor, it makes power." But it wasn't that simple. The human technicians had monitored thousands of variables, temperature differentials, magnetic field fluctuations, fuel mixture ratios. They had made tiny adjustments every hour, keeping everything in perfect balance. The engineers knew how to repair battle damage. They could replace broken components and patch hull breaches. But they had no idea how to optimize a system that wasn't broken, just inefficient. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on thousands of stations and planets. In the Empire, merchant ships drifted in space, unable to calculate proper navigation routes without human astrogation specialists. The pilots knew how to fly ships, but they had relied on humans to plot the complex jumps through hyperspace. In territory, millions of citizens found their daily routines disrupted. The public transportation system ran on the wrong schedule. Food deliveries arrived at incorrect locations. Bills were sent to the wrong addresses. Small problems, but multiplying rapidly. On worlds, life support systems showed increasing errors. Water recycling rates dropped. Air filtration became less efficient. Power consumption rose as automated systems struggled without human oversight. By day 14, 3 minor empires had collapsed into chaos. The Consortium, the Alliance, and the Kelper Federation, all heavily dependent on human workers, descended into civil disorder. The Galactic Council held an emergency session. Stood before the assembly, his confident demeanor gone. "We must contact Earth immediately, offer them better terms." "We tried," Val's replied, his voice tight with stress. "They won't respond to our messages." A general slammed one of his four fists on his desk. "Then we take them by force, launch an attack on their colonies, make them return." "That would be unwise." Doctor's voice came from the communication system. The council chamber fell silent. Every alien turned to the main display screen. Doctor's face appeared, calm and professional. "You're receiving our messages?" asked, hope in his voice. "We receive everything," replied. "We simply choose not to respond." "This is outrageous. You cannot." "We can," interrupted. "And we have. You have 16 days remaining. I suggest you use them to learn how to operate your own infrastructure." "It's impossible," Val's protested. "The systems are too complex." His expression didn't change. "They're not too complex. You're too specialized. You spent centuries perfecting your individual talents, the mastered trade, the mastered administration, the mastered warfare, but none of you learned to be generalists." "What does that mean?" demanded. "It means humans can do many things adequately. You can each do one thing excellently. But modern civilization requires people who can adapt, who can solve unexpected problems, who can work across disciplines." Paused. "You called us jacks of all trades, masters of none, like it was an insult. Now you're learning what happens when you need someone who can do more than one job." The screen went dark. In the silence that followed, the council members looked at each other with growing fear. The general activated his communicator. "Prepare the fleet," he ordered. "We're taking human colony Gamma 7. They'll negotiate once we have hostages." Commander received the warning 30 minutes later. "Attack fleet inbound to Gamma 7. Estimated arrival in 6 hours." He turned to Captain, who had been coordinating the evacuation efforts. "Your call, Captain." Smiled grimly. "Let them come. It's time they learned another lesson." Pulled up the colony defense systems on her display. "Gamma 7 is a farming world. Small population, but we have the orbital defense platform. And we have humans," added. "That's all we need." 6 hours later, the fleet emerged from hyperspace near colony Gamma 7. 12 heavy battleships, each carrying thousands of elite warriors. They had fought and won 100 battles. But they had never fought humans. The orbital defense platform, a small station that the sensors classified as minimal threat, suddenly came alive. Missiles launched, but not in the patterns they expected. Instead of direct approaches, they curved and spiraled, using the planet's gravity to gain speed in unpredictable ways. Point defense systems, designed to stop standard attacks, struggled to track the erratic movements. Then human fighters appeared, small, fast ships that darted between the massive battleships. They didn't try to destroy the enemy vessels. Instead, they targeted sensors, communication arrays, and weapon targeting systems. The admiral watched in confusion as his fleet was blinded and deafened. "What kind of tactics are these? This isn't proper warfare." That was the problem. They had perfected formal warfare, ship-to-ship combat with honor and established rules. Humans fought however worked best. They adapted, they improvised, they cheated. 4 hours after the battle began, the fleet retreated. They hadn't lost a single ship, but they were crippled, unable to fight effectively. The message spread across the galaxy. Humans had won without even trying to win. They had simply refused to fight the way their enemy expected. Back in the council chamber sat in his seat staring at nothing. 12 days remained. His empire was collapsing, and the humans weren't coming back. General stood on the bridge of the human defense station at the border of Earth space. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy, and each one told the same story. The council was falling apart. "Status report," he ordered. A young lieutenant named Bora pulled up the latest data. The Empire has fractured into 7 competing merchant houses. The Collective has lost contact with 40% of their worlds. The Union is evacuating 3 of their forward bases due to life support failures. Nodded slowly, and the minor empires. 6 have completely collapsed. 23 more are experiencing major civil unrest. It had been 18 days since humanity left the Council. 18 days of watching an entire galactic civilization slowly break down. Captain entered the command center, followed by a young woman named. She was only 24, a maintenance engineer who had worked on Prime before the evacuation. General has something you need to hear, said. Looked nervous but determined. Sir, I've been analyzing the failure patterns across Council space. I think I finally understand what's happening. Explain, said. Activated a holographic display. It showed the intricate web of systems that kept the galaxy functioning. For 200 years, humans were integrated into every level of galactic infrastructure. We didn't just maintain systems, we were the connections between them. She highlighted several points on the display. Look at this. They are excellent traders, but they're terrible at mechanical work. They are brilliant administrators, but they can't think creatively. They are powerful warriors, but they have no patience for detailed technical work. We know this, said. Yes, but here's what makes it critical, continued. Each species specialized so much that they forgot how to do anything else. They literally evolved their cultures around being the best at one thing. They teach their children trade from birth. They are raised to follow procedures perfectly. They train for combat from age 3. She zoomed in on specific failures. When a cargo ship breaks down, they can't fix it themselves. They call a specialist. But that specialist is usually from another species, and coordinating between species requires translators, bureaucratic approvals, and payment negotiations. It takes days. But when we were there, asked. When humans were there, we fixed it ourselves. We didn't need specialists. A human maintenance worker understands enough about engines, computers, and structural integrity to handle most problems. We're not experts at any of it, but we're competent at all of it. Bora leaned forward, so we were like universal translators between different types of work. Exactly, eyes lit up. More than that, we were the adaptable element in a rigid system. When something unexpected happened, when a problem didn't fit the standard procedures, humans figured it out. We improvised. We found creative solutions. We made things work even when they shouldn't. Studied the display, and now that we're gone, now they're discovering that their entire civilization was held together by people they considered inferior. Finished. We weren't just workers, we were the glue. On the coordinator, Val's experienced this truth firsthand. The planet's agricultural system was collapsing, not because of any single failure, but because of thousands of small problems that nobody knew how to solve. The automated irrigation system was working perfectly, according to its programming, but the crops were dying. Val's brought in the best agricultural specialists. They examined the data and confirmed the system was operating within normal parameters. But the plants are dying, Val's insisted. The system is functioning correctly, the specialist replied. Therefore, the problem must be with the plants. That was thinking. If the procedure was followed correctly, the result must be correct. They couldn't comprehend that sometimes you needed to look beyond the procedure. A single human farmer, a woman named Sarah who had worked on Prime for 15 years, would have seen the problem immediately. The irrigation was fine, but the soil pH was wrong. The automated system didn't account for seasonal variations. A human would have noticed the yellowing leaves, checked the soil manually, and adjusted the system. But Sora was back on Earth. The specialists kept checking their data and insisting everything was working properly while the crops died. Similar scenarios played out everywhere. On trade stations, Cargo sat in warehouses because the routing algorithms couldn't handle an unexpected shortage of transport ships. They kept waiting for the system to solve itself, unable to grasp that sometimes you needed to manually reroute shipments. On military bases, warriors stared at malfunctioning equipment, knowing it was broken but not knowing how to diagnose the problem. They could replace parts, but they couldn't figure out which part was the issue. By day 21, the situation reached critical levels. The Council's agricultural worlds, which fed billions of beings, were facing massive crop failures. The systems were working but producing no food. The interstellar communication network, which connected thousands of worlds, was degrading. Relay stations operated by humans for decades were starting to fail. The other species tried to maintain them, but they didn't understand the delicate balance of power routing and signal amplification. Messages began taking hours instead of seconds. Some never arrived at all. In the Grand Council chamber, now mostly empty as representatives rushed home to deal with local crises, sat alone. His once-proud posture was slumped. His blue skin had taken on a grayish tinge of stress. The empire, which had controlled galactic trade for 1,000 years, was tearing itself apart. Merchant houses that had cooperated for centuries now fought over the scraps of a dying economy. Ships drifted in space. Stations went dark. Wealth that had seemed eternal evaporated. A message arrived from his own family's merchant house had declared bankruptcy. Everything was gone. Realized too late that the humans hadn't been servants. They had been partners. They had provided the vision and the business acumen, but humans had provided the execution and the problem-solving. Together, they had built something magnificent. Separated, both sides had less than before. On day 23, the Union attempted one last military solution. If they couldn't force the humans to return, perhaps they could steal human technology. A special forces team infiltrated an abandoned human facility on Station 9. They found warehouses full of equipment, computers loaded with data, and detailed maintenance manuals. Finally, the team leader said, "We'll learn their secrets." But there were no secrets. The manuals explained everything clearly. The problem was that understanding the manuals required background knowledge in multiple fields. A section on reactor maintenance assumed you understood basic physics, computer programming, and safety protocols. They were the greatest warriors in the galaxy, but they had never studied physics. They didn't need programming, they had specialists for that. Safety protocols were for the weak. They stood in the facility surrounded by knowledge they couldn't use, like ancient people finding a library in a language they couldn't read. Back on Earth, Ambassador watched the reports with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. President had called an emergency meeting of the human leadership. 25 days, said. 5 days left until our deadline. The Council has sent 47 requests for negotiation. Should we respond? Doctor spoke first. The collapse is accelerating. If we wait much longer, there might not be a council left to negotiate with. Good, General said firmly. Let them burn. They treated us like servants for 200 years. But millions of civilians are suffering, a humanitarian coordinator named argued. People who never voted against us. Children, families. They're going hungry because the agricultural systems are failing. That's not our fault, another official said. No, but it's in our power to fix, countered. The debate raged for hours. Some wanted revenge. Some wanted reconciliation. Some wanted to extract every possible concession before helping. Who had been invited to the meeting because of her insights, raised her hand nervously. May I say something? President nodded. I worked on Prime for 3 years, said. I knew families, they were kind to me. They invited me to their homes. They're not evil, they're just limited. They can't help being what they evolved to be. That doesn't excuse how they treated us, someone argued. No, it doesn't, agreed. But here's the thing. When I fixed their computers, I didn't do it because they deserved it. I did it because I could. Because I'm human and humans solve problems. That's what makes us different. The room fell silent. Doctor smiled slightly. She's right. If we let the galaxy collapse completely, the chaos will reach us eventually. We're all connected. Besides, if we wanted to prove we're better than them, we've done that. Now we need to prove we're wise, not just capable. Stood, I agree, but we negotiate from strength. We help, but on our terms, the council as it was must end. No more second-class citizenship. No more exploitation. President looked around the room, all in favor. The vote was close, but it passed. On day 25, as the empire fragmented into warring factions, as the collective fractured into isolated systems, as the Union teetered on the brink of civil war, a message went out from Earth. It was simple. We will talk, send representatives, neutral territory, no weapons, no threats, just conversation. In the ruins of the council chamber, received the message and wept with relief. The neutral station floated in empty space, exactly halfway between Earth territory and what remained of council space. It was small, hastily built, with just enough room for negotiations. President arrived with a small delegation. Ambassador, doctor, general, and the humanitarian coordinator. They wore simple uniforms, no weapons, no ceremony. The council delegation arrived in a ship that had seen better days. Its hull showed signs of poor maintenance. President noticed that detail. Without humans, they couldn't even keep their diplomatic vessels running properly. Emerged first, followed by Coordinator Valz and General of the. They looked exhausted, stressed, desperate. The two groups met in the conference room. It was bare, just a table, chairs, and a showing the stars outside. President began, his voice lacking its former arrogance. Thank you for meeting with us. We have come to discuss terms for humanity's return to the council. Sat down slowly. I think you misunderstand. Humanity is not returning to the council. Panic flashed across the alien faces. But you must. Val's voice rose in pitch. Our civilization is collapsing. Millions are suffering. And whose fault is that? Asked coldly. Shoulders slumped. Ours, we know that now. We were fools. We took you for granted. You treated us like servants, said quietly. For 200 years we built your infrastructure, fought your wars, solved your problems, and you gave us 3% of the vote. We were wrong, rumbled, his four arms spread in a gesture of supplication. We thought strength was only about warfare. We didn't understand that adaptation is strength, that flexibility is power. Leaned forward. So what exactly are you asking for? Help us, Val said simply. Come back, fix the systems, save our people. We'll give you anything you want. Better pay, more representation, whatever you require. No. The single word hung in the air. No, repeated, confusion in his voice. We're not going back to the way things were, explained. The Galactic Council is finished. That system failed. It created a civilization built on exploitation and inequality. We won't restore it. Then what do you want? Demanded. Doctor activated it showed a document. These are our terms, read them carefully. The aliens studied the screen. With each line, their expressions changed from hope to shock. This is the dissolution of the council, Val said. Yes, confirmed. You want to rebuild everything from scratch? Asked. We want to build something better, replied. A galactic assembly with actual equal representation. Voting power based on population and contribution, not on who arrived first. Fair trade agreements. Mutual defense pacts with actual mutuality. Labor laws that protect workers. But this would take years to implement, Val's protested. Decades probably, agreed, but we have to start somewhere. Slammed a fist on the table. Our people are starving now, we don't have decades. Then we'll help, spoke for the first time. Humanity will send aid immediately. Food, medical supplies, technical support, but only for civilians, only for humanitarian relief. What's the catch? Asked suspiciously. No catch, said. We help because it's the right thing to do, because that's what humans do. The aliens exchanged glances, uncertain. I don't understand, Val said. If you'll help anyway, why do we need to accept these terms? Answered, the humanitarian aid is temporary. It keeps people alive while you learn to fix your own systems. The terms are permanent. They determine what kind of galaxy we build together. And if we refuse, asked. Shrugged. Then we keep helping civilians until they're stable, and then we leave you to figure out the rest yourselves. Humanity will be fine. We have our own space, our own resources. We don't need the galaxy. The question is whether the galaxy needs us. The truth of that statement settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Looked at his fellow council members. They had come expecting to negotiate from desperation, hopping to convince humans to return on any terms. Instead, they found humans willing to help but unwilling to be exploited again. I need to consult with my government, Val said. You have 5 hours, replied. After that, we're leaving. The council delegation retreated to their ship. Through the humans watched them argue, heated gestures, raised voices translated by their systems. Think they'll accept? Asked. They don't have much choice, said. Their civilization is dying. But pride is a powerful thing, cautioned, especially for species that considered themselves superior. Stood and walked to the... I keep thinking about the civilians, the children who don't have food because the agricultural systems failed, the families stranded on stations, the workers suffering because their life support is degrading. That's why we're offering aid, reminded him. I know, but, trailed off. Is it wrong that I want to help them, even though their governments treated us terribly? Smiled. That's what makes you human. We can be angry at the system while still caring about the people trapped in it. 3 hours later, the council delegation returned. They looked older somehow, worn down by the weight of their decision. Spoke first. We have discussed your terms, the Empire, what remains of it, will accept. Vals nodded. The collective agrees. Crossed his forearms. The Union will also accept, but I have a question. Ask, said. Why help us at all? We treated you poorly. We dismissed you. We laughed at you. You could walk away and let us fall. Why don't you? Considered the question carefully. Because we're better than that. Because civilian suffering isn't a tool for political leverage. Because, she paused, because when you build a new system, you want it to start with hope, not revenge. Hope, repeated the word slowly, as if tasting something unfamiliar. Yes, hope that we can all be better. Hope that we can build a galaxy where every species contributes according to their strengths and is respected for it. Stood. But make no mistake, if you betray this agreement, if you fall back into old patterns, we will walk away again, and next time we won't come back. The aliens understood. This was mercy, but also a warning. Doctor pulled up another document. Now, let's discuss the practical steps. First, we need to stabilize the agricultural systems. I'll be leading a team of human engineers to... Wait, Vals interrupted. You're sending your people back after everything. Temporarily, clarified. To teach, not to do the work forever. Your people need to learn how to maintain these systems yourselves. But that will take... Years, yes, said patiently. That's why we're starting now. Every human who goes back will have a counterpart from your species. They'll work together, learn together. When the human leaves, your person will know how to continue the work. Activated his data pad. We've already organized humanitarian teams. Food distribution will begin within 48 hours. Medical supplies are being loaded now. But prompted. But you need to help us help you, explained. We need your governments to organize distribution points. We need security to prevent hoarding. We need your people to trust our people again." "That may be difficult," Vals admitted. "There is much anger. Many blame humans for abandoning us." His expression hardened. "We didn't abandon you. You drove us away." "I know," Val said quietly, "but emotions are not always logical." "Then make them logical," said. "Your people need to understand that this is a new beginning. The old council is dead. What we build next depends on whether we can work together as equals." The negotiations continued for hours. Details were hammered out, timelines established, resources allocated. It was exhausting, complicated work. But it was also hopeful. As the meeting ended, approached President privately. "I have a personal question." "Go ahead." "Why you? Why did you agree to help specifically? You could have sent someone else." Smiled. "Because I needed to look into your eyes and see if you truly understood what went wrong, if you were just desperate, or if you had actually learned something." "And I think you have. I think you finally see us as equals," extended her hand. "Now we find out if that understanding lasts." Took her hand in his larger, blue-skinned one. "It will. I promise you it will." As the human delegation prepared to leave, looked back at the council representatives. They looked small somehow, humbled by circumstance and failure. "Do you think this will work?" he asked quietly. The ambassador considered the question. "I think we have a chance, a real chance. That's all we can ask for." Their ship departed the neutral station, heading back toward Earth. Behind them, the council delegation returned to their broken empire to begin the long work of rebuilding. The galaxy would never be the same, but perhaps, just perhaps, it would be better. 6 months had passed since the negotiation. The galaxy was changing, slowly and painfully, into something new. Ambassador stood in what had once been the Grand Galactic Council chamber. The massive dome still stretched overhead, but everything else was different. The old tiered seating, which had placed some species above others, was gone. In its place, circular tables arranged in a pattern that gave every delegation equal access to the center. This was the reformed Galactic Assembly, and was its co-chair alongside. "Ready for today's session?" asked. The merchant looked healthier than he had 6 months ago, though his eyes still carried the weight of hard lessons learned. "As ready as I'll ever be," replied. The chamber filled with representatives from 47 species. But now, each had voting power proportional to their population and contribution to galactic stability. Earth alone held 15% of the vote. The old council members had to share power with species they'd once considered too minor to matter. It was uncomfortable for them, but it was fair. On the planet Prime, Coordinator Vals walked through an agricultural facility with a young named Kelvin and a human instructor named Minu. "Explain the soil pH adjustment again," Vals requested. Kelvin, barely 20 years old, pulled up a data screen. "The automated system monitors the pH every hour, but during seasonal transitions, we need to check manually because the system can't predict localized variations caused by weather." "And if the pH is wrong?" Vals asked. "We calculate the correction needed and input it here," Kelvin demonstrated. "The system doesn't do it automatically because soil conditions vary too much. You need to look at the specific situation." Minu nodded approvingly. "Good, you're learning to think beyond the procedures." This was happening across the galaxy. Human engineers, technicians, and specialists had returned, but only as teachers. Each human worked with alien counterparts, training them in the art of adaptation and creative problem-solving. It was slow work. The aliens struggled with concepts humans found natural. Just improvise was not a meaningful instruction to species that had been following procedures for thousands of years. But gradually they learned. On Station 12, A young merchant named watched as a human logistics coordinator named Bora demonstrated cargo routing. The algorithm gives you the optimal route, Bora explained. But optimal doesn't always mean practical. See, this route is technically faster, but it requires passing through a system that's experiencing solar flares. What do you do? Studied the display. 6 months ago, he would have followed the algorithm blindly. Now he thought critically. Choose the second fastest route that avoids the danger. Exactly. You're learning to question the data, not just accept it. Felt a surge of pride. They had always prided themselves on their business acumen, but they'd never understood the practical side of trade. They'd left that to others. Now they were learning that understanding the whole process from planning to execution made them better merchants. On a military base, General observed training exercises with a human military advisor named. Your warriors are excellent in direct combat, commented. But watch what happens when we introduce uncertainty. On the training field, soldiers faced a simulation where the terrain kept changing, objectives shifted randomly, and equipment malfunctioned. The warriors, trained for honorable combat, struggled. This is chaos, protested. This is reality, corrected. In real combat, nothing goes according to plan. You need to teach your soldiers to adapt, to think creatively, to find solutions when the standard tactics fail. Watched as a young warrior faced with broken equipment, used pieces from damaged vehicles to create a makeshift weapon. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't traditional, but it worked. Clever, admitted grudgingly. That's the human way, said. When the plan fails, make a new plan. When the tool breaks, make a new tool. When the path is blocked, find a different path. The concept was alien to culture, but they were learning, slowly. In the reformed Galactic Assembly, a debate raged about a new proposal. A small species called the wanted representation. Under the old council, they would have been ignored, too few members, too little wealth. Under the new system, they had a voice. They contribute 0.5% of the galactic population, and representative calculated. They should receive proportional representation. A delegate objected, but they have no significant economic power. Leaned forward. The new charter doesn't measure only economic power. It measures population, cultural contribution, innovation, and stability contribution. They may be small, but they've developed unique agricultural techniques that benefit the entire sector. Supported him. Ambassador is correct. We can't return to judging species only by narrow metrics. That's what failed before. The vote passed. They received their seat. It was a small moment, but it represented everything that had changed. The galaxy was learning to value diversity of contribution, not just traditional measures of power. In a research facility on Earth, Doctor met with scientists from a dozen species. They were studying the collapse of the old council, trying to understand how it had happened. The pattern is clear, and scientists presented. The council's civilization had become too interdependent without true integration. Each species specialized to the point of vulnerability. Like an ecosystem with no redundancy, a researcher added. Remove one keystone species and everything collapses. Humans were that keystone, another noted. Shook her head. No, we were a symptom, not a cause. The real problem was the assumption that specialization was always better, that focusing on one thing made you superior. But specialization does create excellence, the scientist argued. In some ways, yes, agreed. But a civilization can't survive on excellence alone. You need resilience, adaptability, the ability to solve problems that don't fit neatly into established categories. She pulled up a historical chart. Look at Earth's history. Our most successful civilizations weren't the ones with the best specialists. They were the ones that could respond to change, that could integrate new ideas, that valued people who could do many things adequately over people who could do one thing perfectly. The alien scientists studied the data, their minds opening to new ways of thinking. On Prime, young Kelvin made his first independent decision. The agricultural monitoring system showed an anomaly, nothing critical, but unusual. The standard procedure said to log it and continue normal operations. Kelvin remembered what Minu had taught him. He looked at the actual plants instead of just the data. The leaves showed slight discoloration that the sensors hadn't detected yet. He made an adjustment to the nutrient mixture, documenting his reasoning. 2 days later, the plants recovered. What could have become a significant problem was prevented because someone had thought beyond the procedure. Minu reviewed the report and smiled. "You did good, Kelvin, really good." "I still made mistakes," Kelvin admitted. "My calculation was off by 0.3%. But you saw the problem, thought critically, and took action. That's what matters." Minu paused. "I think you're ready." "Ready for what?" "To work alone. You don't need me anymore." Kelvin felt a surge of panic. "But I still have so much to learn." "Everyone always has more to learn, that's the point." Minu put a hand on the young's shoulder. "The difference is, now you know how to learn, you can adapt, you can figure things out. You're not just following procedures anymore, you're thinking." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Human teachers gradually stepped back as their alien students grew confident. It wasn't perfect. Mistakes were made. Some systems still failed. But the aliens were learning to solve problems themselves. In the reformed Galactic Assembly, addressed the chamber on the 6-month anniversary of the new government. 6 months ago, we sat in this room as broken empires begging for help. Today, we stand as a community of equals. He gestured around the chamber. It hasn't been easy. We've had disagreements, failures, setbacks, but we've also had successes. He pulled up statistics. Food production is at 85% of pre-collapse levels. Communication networks are 90% restored. Trade routes are reopening. And most importantly, species that once relied entirely on human workers are now doing that work themselves. A young delegate stood. "Not as efficiently as humans did," she noted. Smiled. "No, not as efficiently. Not yet, but you're learning, and that's more valuable than efficiency. Because now, if humans left again, the galaxy wouldn't collapse. You'd struggle, yes, but you'd survive." Added, "That was the goal all along. Not to make us dependent on human charity, but to make us capable of standing on our own." The chamber erupted in agreement. Not the unanimous vote of the old council, but the messy, diverse approval of genuine democracy. After the session, met with President via video link. "How's it going?" asked from Earth. "Better than expected. The transition is working. They're actually learning." "And the humans who stayed as teachers, how are they holding up?" Considered. "They're tired. Teaching species who never had to think flexibly is exhausting work, but they're making progress. Minu just released his first student to work independently." "That's huge," said. "What's the timeline for bringing all our people home?" "Another 6 months, maybe a year. Once each alien has a competent teacher of their own species, they won't need us." "And you, when are you coming home?" Looked around the chamber. "When I'm sure this will last, when I'm confident they won't backslide into old patterns." "You think they might?" "I think change is hard, especially for species that spent centuries believing they were superior." Paused. "But I also think they've learned something valuable. They've learned humility, and that might be the most important lesson of all." 3 months later, in a small ceremony, the last human teacher left Prime. Kelvin and hundreds of other young had become teachers themselves, spreading the knowledge to their own people. On stations, native logistics coordinators managed the cargo systems with growing confidence. They still made mistakes, but they learned from them. On bases, warriors practiced creative tactics alongside traditional combat. Their culture was evolving, becoming more flexible. The galaxy was healing, not returning to what it was, but growing into something new. Ambassador stood in the reformed Galactic Assembly one final time. His term as co-chair was ending. A human named would replace him, working alongside a young coordinator who had never known the old council. "Before I go," addressed the assembly, "I want to say something about what we've learned." The chamber quieted. 200 years ago, humans joined the Galactic Council. We were excited to be part of something bigger, but we were never truly part of it. We were servants, not partners. He looked around the room at the diverse species. "When we left, it wasn't because we hated you. It was because we refused to be less than equal. And in our absence, you learned what we knew all along, that no species is superior. We're all just different, different strengths, different ways of thinking." The old council failed because it ranked species. It said some were better than others. The reformed assembly succeeds because it values all contributions. They teach us about trade. They teach us about organization. They teach us about honor. And humans, we teach adaptability. But here's the truth we all need to remember. None of us is complete alone. We need each other, not as masters and servants, but as equals, as partners. Step down from the podium. The assembly erupted in applause from every species, genuine respect. As he left the chamber for the last time, walked beside him. "Will you return to Earth?" they asked. "For a while, but I think I'll come back to the galaxy eventually. There's still work to do." "Always work to do," agreed. "That's what we learned from you. The work is never finished. You just keep adapting, keep solving problems, keep moving forward." Smiled, "Now you're thinking like a human." "Is that a compliment?" "The highest one I can give." They parted at the docking bay, boarded his ship heading home to Earth. Behind him, the galaxy continued its slow transformation. The old Galactic Council was gone. The empires that had seemed eternal had fallen. But from those ruins, something better was growing. A civilization that valued diversity over dominance, that prized adaptability over specialization, that understood the simple truth humans had always known. When you're part of a community, everyone contributes and everyone matters. The galaxy had learned its lesson. It had learned what happened when you take people for granted, when you exploit instead of partner, when you dismiss instead of respect. It had learned the hard way. But sometimes, the hard way is the only way that the lesson truly sticks. And as Ambassador's ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying him home, the galaxy continued without humans holding it together. Because now finally it could.